You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 86. Today I'll be talking to Katie Gamb. Alright, so my name is Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist Katie Gamb. Katie creates beautiful paintings that are really reminiscent of illustrated storybooks or, like old fables. And what you'll find out in our conversation is that her love for illustrated books and fables ties all the way back to her childhood, growing up with a firm fascination for these rich tales. We talk about that, as well as how she approaches storytelling in her own works, her upcoming solo show at Bain Art Gallery, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Katie Gamb. Katie, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you on.
It's really good to be here. I'm honored. Thank you, Michael.
Awesome. So let's dive into your background a little bit. And I know that you grew up in the rural Midwest, I believe in Kiel, Wisconsin specifically.
Yes.
And looking at Google, because I don't know Wisconsin a whole lot other than the large cities, but it seems to be like midway between Green Bay and Milwaukee, kind of on the eastern part of the state. And I looked up the population. It is rather small, 4,000-ish, I think, today. So pretty small vibe. But what was it like when you were growing up?
Same. Yeah, I think, still 4,000. It was, like pretty typical small Midwestern town. We grew up, I didn't live in the city, quote, air quotes, proper. We lived in the country, like about a 10-minute drive. So it was pretty, like surrounded by woods and stuff like that. I really enjoyed it, kind of being surrounded by nature and stuff like that. But the town itself was it was a pretty quiet town. There wasn't like a ton going on, but it was good. It was like pretty tight knit, typical small town. I was happy to leave it for sure. And I think I was like a little too excited to leave it when I was there. Yes. Very like rage against the town and rebel, stuff like that. But
I mean, with it being so far removed from like urban centers, you mentioned that you were surrounded by nature. Did you spend a lot of time in nature as a kid? Was it something that you felt like at one with?
I did. Yeah, I did. We lived in like two houses, kind of staying in the same town, but moving houses, both in the country, and both had a fair amount of woods outside. And just like my favorite activity was just to go like hang out and like look in logs and poke at different stuff. And I, for the holidays, went to visit my folks and saw they have a picture of me from when I was a little kid. It's me sitting in like tall, like waist high grass in one of the fields. And it's just like, that was literally my favorite place to be. I just like to be like hidden in the grass.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah. So I really liked it.
So your parents are still there? I guess you go back from time to time?
They are. Yeah, they're still there. Was just up there. It's something that I've been kind of planning on, fingers crossed, doing. I'd love to go like do some painting there, like some plein air painting. They have a gorgeous view at their house. It's like on a hill and it's like a really pretty area. So I like to kind of go back and visit. They have a lot of gardens. So kind kind of like helping out with that. They've started an orchard, which is
wow.
pretty nice. Yeah,
That's huge.
It's
An apple orchard?
yeah, they have apples and peaches and pears,
Wow.
chestnuts. It's pretty idyllic. Like there's a
That's
picnic table
awesome.
out there. Yeah, it's a really nice spot to be.
So what kind of work did they do when you were like coming up? Was it some kind of farming or?
No, surprisingly not. It's very much like a hobby farm. They're really into gardening, but my dad was a maintenance mechanic at Kohler for a really long time. And when we were younger, my mom was home with us, and then she started working for the school when we were a little older. So she's a library aide right now. My dad's retired now, but yeah, he was a maintenance mechanic.
So did you have any family members that were artistic or had any kind of art interest, or how did you get exposure to the arts?
No one had art as like a career, really, but it's like a very creative group of people in that everyone kind of does something. Everyone makes something. So like my mom is a really good cook. So I think like kind of creative wise, she always like did really interesting things with food and baking. And my grandma would like sew us Barbie clothes and stuff like that. And my mom always helped me with like crafts, and we were always kind of working on something or making Valentines. And see, I'm trying to think of pretty much the closest thing to a creative career in my family is I had a great aunt, Nelda, who moved to Chicago. And this was in the like 20s, 30s, 40s. And she made debutante dresses.
Oh, wow.
And she never had kids, and she married this rich guy, and she's like the cool aunt I never got to meet pretty much. But that's probably the closest thing to being like a professional artist in the family.
Okay. So how did you become interested in making art yourself? If it's something that, you know, it was more of a side thing for a lot of people, but how did you like really cling on to that?
I guess I just always really liked doodling and drawing, and it was something that I was just kind of drawn to as a kid. I wonder, like, I mean, art classes, it just kind of became like I became the art kid really quickly, just kind of naturally being, and I don't even think I was like that much better than anyone. It was just like I was just doing it all the time. So it was like, oh, that's Katie. She's the art kid. So like between that and I was really, really into illustration as a little kid. I loved books and I loved reading. And I would just pick out, like, I would come home with just armfuls of books and was like particularly drawn to like, was it like Don and Audrey Wood? Like there was like King Bidgood's in the bathtub, and there's like a book with a mouse and a strawberry and the big bear, and I just like I would just like look at the pictures. I didn't even really care about the words. I would just look at the pictures.
Nice. Did you have a favorite series? Like I know I was reading Peter Rabbit type books to my nieces over the pandemic, you know, via Zoom.
Oh yeah.
But what were your favorites? Did you have any ones that you loved?
Honestly, that probably was a big one. Anything with Beatrix Potter. I had a big like Beatrix Potter compendium that I would pour through. Oh yes, but hold on. I wrote down a bunch of names because I was like, I know I'm going to forget every single name. But William Joyce, who wrote Dinosaur Bob and the Leaf Men. Yeah, I loved those. And we also had a bunch of like mysteries of the universe, you know, those weird kind of like Guinness Book of World Records type books. We had a ton of those. I just remember reading those all the time. I loved those. They were so weird.
And so you kind of had this reputation of being the art kid. Did that kind of push you into wanting to be an artist? Was it sort of like both your own interest in the art, but also like reinforced by people's perception of you as an artist? Did that motivate you to kind of pursue art as a career?
Honestly, yeah, probably a little bit. It was certainly something that I loved doing. It's a good way to connect with people. As like a naturally very shy person, it always kind of ended up being something that like one of my favorite activities with my best friend is I'll sit and draw stuff and she'll just tell me what to draw and like time me. So she's like 30 seconds, you have to draw a giraffe.
Oh, wow.
With like a motorcycle helmet or I don't know, something weird like that. So we would just like sit at coffee shops and do that. So I think that was certainly part of it. And just like generally being encouraged, like as a kid, you want to please people. So you want to do the thing that you're encouraged to do. And like I had a lot of creative outlets. I was like doing a lot of music and I did a weird amount of theater when I was in high school. Yeah. I don't know where like it not before nor since, but yeah, in high school, it was all about doing all sorts of different theater. So like there've been a lot of different creative things, but I think the art thing, just because it is, yeah, just like a way to connect with people.
And was it something that your parents like actively supported for you? Did they encourage that side of you?
Yes. Yeah, very much so. I feel super lucky in that my parents have always been really encouraging. Concerned and wary, but still encouraging. Like when I was like, I want to go to art school, they were like, that's great. What are you going to do to make money? So like very aware of my own tendency to be like a little unrealistic about that kind of stuff and being like, okay, you want to be an artist. But yeah, also really, really supportive and just always, I mean, they would drive me to like events when I had like forensics and band stuff. So always really supportive of creative stuff.
So practically supportive. They're
yes.
Like, okay, we're going to support you, but let's do something that you can live on.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned wanting to go to art school, and I know that you went to Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. Why there specifically? What was it about Milwaukee that won you over?
It was close. Was a big one. It was, I mean, going from a smaller town like Kiel, I thought about going further away. I had a friend going to RISD and he encouraged me to apply. But it felt I was kind of a timid kid. So I was like, that's a really big stretch. I think I'm going to take like a baby step to Milwaukee and go to MIAD. Also that, and I got a scholarship, which is, that's a pretty big push.
For sure. And what was your focus while you were there? Was it illustration throughout the whole time, or did it change up while you were there?
It was illustration the whole time. When I was applying, there's the first year you go, it's like you're just kind of like looking at different majors and trying a bunch of different stuff. But when I was looking at the like promo materials and looking at all the work from the different majors, illustration was the only one that I was like, yes, this is the kind of work I want to be creating, because it's like fun and funny, and not that other work from the other majors can't be funny, but I was just really drawn to it. So yeah, I was in illustration the whole time. I did kind of, as I was in the illustration department, sort of realized how drawn I am to like traditional mediums and the fine arts. Like I feel like I kind of land somewhere in between like the fine arts and illustration. So I kind of lobbied to take a fine arts history class instead of doing the design history class. And then like I took some painting classes instead of some of the computer classes, because they were kind enough to let me do whatever. So it came back to bite me in the butt a little bit later, just because I like missed out on that computer stuff and was like, oh, right, I can't do any graphic design. That would be really practically helpful, but I can paint now. So that's nice.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool that they let you like explore those different sides of your interests. Did they give you much exposure to like the gallery world? Like, were you able to kind of have that type of setting or show your work in that type of setting?
When I was there, not particularly. Like, I was still like very much in the illustration department, where the focus was on like working project by project. And I think some of the classes where they exposed you to the gallery world was more in like the, not just the painting classes, but I don't even know what classes they were. I'm sure they had like gallery work 101 classes that I did not end up taking. Yeah, so not a ton with that. I wish. I mean, it would have been helpful. I feel like I've kind of gotten the hang of it now, but there was definitely a big learning curve when I started doing gallery work and I was shipping out stuff, and it was just like, girl, what are you doing?
I mean, honestly, from what I've heard, people that have taken fine art programs, they don't do a whole lot of that either in the fine art program.
Okay, yeah.
As far as like preparing people to be a working artist, I've heard that there's a bit of gap there, even if you're in a fine art program. Yeah. But what was your career goal at that point? Were you wanting to go into book illustration? Is that what you're aiming for?
I didn't really know. I didn't really know at the time. I think probably book illustration was the closest thing. Sophomore or junior year, somewhere midway through, I discovered High Fructose magazine.
Nice.
And kind of was exposed to all the pop surrealist artists like Mark Ryden and Camille Rose Garcia and stuff like that, and realized that it was possible to create this like fun, illustrative, kind of like inspired by the real world, but a little weird art, and have a career as a gallery artist. And I kind of like opened my eyes to the possibilities and like, oh, I don't have to just do like traditional illustration or book illustration. I can do something else. So I think I kind of, in my heart, that's what I wanted to do. And I still do want to do book illustration, but like on the surface, I was kind of like, I'm going to be a freelance illustrator. But in my heart, I was like, I want to do this.
That's awesome. I guess looking back on your time, you graduated in 2009, you got your BFA from MIAD. How do you feel about your time there? Did it help you like grow in the ways that you felt you needed?
Yeah, yes, and no, mostly yes. I think it was a largely positive experience. I do wish that I wish I waited a year and then I went to college. And I feel this is a pretty common feeling among a lot of people, just because it's like going straight from high school to college. I was like a child in a lot of ways. I was like a little immature, and I was, I kind of wish I took more advantage of being there. That being said, it helped a lot in terms of like just the churn of creating work every day, being so immersed in it, meeting different people who are creating different kinds of work. Like, I think that's really the most valuable part of going to an art school specifically, that like you're just so surrounded in it and like so surrounded by it and so like immersed in everything that I don't know if I would be doing what I'm doing now if I didn't have that experience. So
nice. I guess thinking about the waiting a year to start, what do you feel that the year would have given you? Just time to explore things on your own before going into a formal education?
I think so. Yeah, time to explore things on my own, time to just like kind of find what I actually want to be doing, I suppose, as opposed to just kind of going into it because I feel like this is something I should be doing because this is kind of like what you do. Time to kind of like grow up a little bit, like be in, like have a crappy job. I mean, I did have like crappy jobs during the summers. I'm not saying I didn't do that, but just kind of time to realize like what I really wanted before going into a situation like that, and just having some more life experience, I guess.
And so after graduating, did you just stay in Milwaukee at that point? I know you live there now. Had that like become home for you?
Yeah, it did. Honestly, I'm still living in the same neighborhood that I lived in when I was in college, which is, it's crazy to think about. And it feels weird to say like, oh, I'm like still in the same neighborhood, but like, I really like it here. Like I like the neighborhood and I have friends here, and we've lived in the same apartment for like, 8 years, maybe, me and my partner. So, I like the city. I like its Chicago adjacency. it's a good mid-sized situation in that you get like there's things to do and shows to go to and things to experience, but it's not quite as just anonymous and hectic and kind of difficult to deal with logistically as living in a larger city like Chicago.
Yeah. Do you go into Chicago from time to time? I mean, it being that close?
Yeah, we go pretty frequently. Just between like going to see shows, and she just moved up here to Milwaukee, but I had a best friend who lived there for a long time, so I would visit her a lot. And I'm going to be going down there in April for like a big market thing. So yeah, we go down there pretty frequently.
Very cool. And so what kind of work did you do right out of school? Did you just jump right into your personal practice, or did you do other types of work initially?
Oh, no. I think I had the classic art school burnout situation where it was just like 4 years of working so hard. And then I was done, and there was like no one pushing me to get this work done. And I just like, I don't think I painted anything for like a year or 2 years afterwards. Yeah, it was, I was working in a coffee shop, and I graduated the same year the economy collapsed. So there were some jobs. I had some friends who got some freelance design jobs after, but like that not being really my focus, I kind of had a hard time finding any sort of like stable work. So I just kind of stayed working at the coffee house and was like, what am I doing? Right. But after that 2 years, I started working again and kind of started playing around with different styles. And I feel like that's really where I got to explore like my own personal work, just because I was beholden to no one, and I wasn't really showing anywhere. I was just kind of like creating stuff because I finally like wanted to again, because I had kind of like gotten over being burned out. So I feel like that was kind of the opportunity to really like discover what I wanted to do.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I've read that it takes like a year and a half to recover from like serious burnout. So
yeah.
I mean, it's good that you had the time to do that. It
was, yeah. It felt pretty horrible at the time, but it was an inevitability. Like, I don't think I had the words to describe it at the time. I don't know if burnout was even a part of the conversation, but that is definitely what it was, for sure.
And so what sparked that or ignited that interest in you again to jump back into painting?
I had painted for so long to I don't know, saying this makes me feel like people are like demanding I paint things, but it was to please people. A lot of it was to like fulfill an assignment, to just because I'm kind of being encouraged to do things, and to like be the art kid. And then finally I just sort of realized that no, this is something that I really, really love to do. And I just kind of didn't feel like myself without doing it, and was like, if I'm going to actually do this, I need to start kind of getting my shit together. I don't know if you can swear on this, but like getting my life together and like actually starting to work if I'm going to be an artist in any way, shape, or form. So I kind of like fell in love with it again, I guess you could say. After that, it's like kind of regaining my sense of identity in art.
And what form did that take initially? Was it just setting up a routine where you would work after you got off like your day job work, or how did that manifest as you were getting back on your feet?
Yeah, I had let's see, where I started working again. I was this was the studio apartment. So I had a table that I would set up. And I mean, it was just me. So like, it was my dining room table. So it was like, this is now my art table. I don't need a dining room. Sure.
So I mean, when you live by yourself, who needs a dining room table?
Exactly. I mean, we don't even use it now. So like, I feel like the dining room is a part of the past in a big way. But like, pretty much when I was off of work, just coming home and it just started off as doodling. And then I was like, I want to create like this little body of work. So I would create like 5 paintings, kind of with the aim of showing them together. And I think my first like quote show was at Sparrow Collective. It's like just like a little jewelry shop. So I met them through one of my service industry jobs, and they agreed to show my work. So like that was kind of the first thing to start working for. But yeah, it was very much just like carve out some time after I worked at a coffee shop at the time. So it was really early days. So I would like get up at like, oh God, what time did we open? Probably like get up at 4 or 5 and open. And then I would have like from 2 o'clock on to work on stuff. So.
Okay, cool. And you mentioned like kind of making some of those connections with galleries. Was it just something that you reached out to them and was like, hey, I really want to start showing? Or like, were you submitting to different galleries to get that kind of exposure?
Yes. Yeah. At first it was me kind of submitting stuff to galleries to get exposure. It was honestly, it was a lot of just kind of knowing people that did really help, because I like that first like Sparrow was one of the owners of Sparrow was the sister of one of my coworkers. So that coworker was like, hey, my coworker's an artist and she might want to show there. And like that's kind of how that happened. And then my next one several years later was at Hot Pop, this RIP Hot Pop. I miss them so much. But one of the cooler, like kind of closer to like pop surrealism art, like galleries in Milwaukee, like they were definitely my favorite. But that was just through, I think I submitted my work to them once and heard nothing. But then like later on, they contacted me after like hearing about my work from like one of their friends who I also worked with. So there was a lot of like co-workery like stuff going on, at least for like local galleries.
And what is the art community like there in Milwaukee, or at least when you were kind of showing there at the time?
It was, I think, still today, like small and tight knit. It's not very large, but it's really passionate people who kind of want to do things for themselves. Honestly, these days now it has like blossomed. Like it seems like there's a really vibrant art community. It felt a little less vibrant back then. I don't know if that's because I was less aware of it. Like maybe there's someone out there who's like, no, we were doing really cool stuff. But like I wasn't super aware of it. I wasn't quite as plugged in. But like scrappy. I'll call it scrappy. Okay, that's good.
You've since had a couple shows, solo shows at Haven Gallery, including your last show. I feel like that gallery seems like a really good fit for you, just, thematically. How did you first connect with Erica and start, showing on the East Coast?
So I don't know exactly how she found me. I feel like it had something to do with Instagram, but three years before my first show at Haven, that was in 2021. So in 2018, I had a show at Clutter Gallery in Beacon, New York. So I kind of wonder if that East Coast connection had something to do with it. If she maybe like saw what I was showing there and was like, that's something that would fit in. Or if she found my work on Instagram. I'm not actually sure. I should ask her, actually. Yeah, but I think it was something like that. That I haven't, I don't know if this is like I know you're supposed to go out and like promote yourself and always be like sending your work to galleries and always hustling to get stuff. But like I found that the best relationships I've had with galleries are the ones where they find me.
Okay.
And like kind of letting that happen, which is just more an act of putting yourself out there to like a broader audience and hoping someone finds you. That's probably terrible advice, but that's the way it's worked best for me.
But in that vein, I mean, in order for them to discover you, there has to be some conduit, right? So your Instagram or some kind of social media presence so that they can at least find you.
Yeah. They've got to find you somehow. So definitely like Instagram, as much as like to complain about Instagram. It's been instrumental in just like getting my work out there. I mean, not being a very self-promoting type person, like that act of like, just let me put this here. If you want to do something with it, cool. If you don't, you don't have to. And just having, there be like the option of someone finding it and being like, oh, this is cool, and picking it up and like carrying it with them.
Has it been important to you to have that kind of strong like gallery, or, you know, a strong relationship with a gallery or like a handful of galleries? Has that been like an important component of your career?
It has been. Yeah. I think that I realize there's kind of a conversation going on about like the necessity of galleries now that Instagram and the internet is a thing. You can very much be your own gallery and find your own buyers, but it's just really worked best for me personally. I just like the idea that my work is going to be physically seen together, like in its like the way it's meant to be seen, kind of like as a group. I like that idea. I like just having people to work with, basically. Like like Erica, who owns Haven, is like really cool, and I love like kind of being able to talk to her about art, and they do a lot of work in terms of like helping the artists like to promote the show, to have a list of collectors ready to go, to kind of like be an intermediate between the artist and the collectors and the people there, and like helping out. So I have really enjoyed my relationships with galleries. I think it's a pretty important part of what I do.
Awesome. And it helps that you found a good, like a synergistic relationship, or a gallery that really kind of fits your needs and style well. Because, you know, there's definitely opposite like horror stories where people have been taken advantage of. So when you find a good gallery, like it's great that you've kind of made that connection, and it's been fulfilling to you. I guess, how do you feel like the reverse situation? What role do you see social media playing in the modern career of, you know, like a working artist? And has that changed as you've kind of matured in your practice?
Yeah, it's changing all the time. So I've taught a few classes back at MyAd. So I've found myself in the position of like talking to younger artists and them asking my opinion or for advice of like, oh, how did you use Instagram to like further your career? Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, honestly, I don't know, because it's changing so fast and changing all the time. Like, I can tell you what I did and maybe that would be helpful to you, but like, I don't know what it's going to look like in the next like year, let alone like 5-10 years. But I do think that it has really even the playing fields. I mean, like kind of getting rid of gatekeepers. I know that's what everyone says, but instead of having to find like that one person to please, you can just kind of like put your work out there. And like galleries are always looking for more artists. So yeah, social media. Plus, this is another big thing that I've really enjoyed about social media is that you like get to know other artists, and it's a good way to have a community. Especially if you live in a smaller town and you don't have those other artists like living in your same neighborhood, you can kind of like make a community of other artists there, which is something that I've really enjoyed. So yeah, it definitely has a role, but I wonder what's going to happen in the next few years, if Instagram is just going to totally like go the way of Facebook and be this weird ghost town, or like... I don't know. Yeah. Sorry. I wish I had a better answer for that. I'm curious. No, I mean,
I don't know that anybody has an answer for that, because to your point, it is constantly changing and not always for the better. You mentioned, you know, teaching at MyAd. I did see that you were listed as a member of the faculty there, which, you know, obviously you went there. So how did you get into teaching? How did like you return to that school and become a member of the faculty?
Oh yeah. Actually, this happened in 2020, like right when COVID happened. I had just started teaching. So basically, the head of the illustration department was seeking out new adjunct faculty. And I don't know how he got my name or decided. Oh no, you know what? I'll bet this is what it was. Some of my old teachers are still teaching there, and
Hmm.
I'll bet they knew that I was still in the area and were like, just kind of thinking of different former students who would make good candidates, and just my name popped up. So I'm guessing that's what it was. But they contacted me. I started teaching in person 2 or 3 months in. COVID happened and we pivoted to online. So that was my introduction to teaching, which was like, dear Lord, what did I get myself into? Yeah. So that was exciting, but yeah, so that's kind of how I got into doing that. I've taken the past year off, just because I've had so many projects. I just like haven't had time to do that, but it was a really nice kind of soft landing place for me because I had been working in the service industry like all through this whole time up till 2020. And when they offered me that job, I was working at a cocktail bar. And I was kind of trying to do both at the same time, teach and work at the cocktail bar and do my art career. And it was a lot. And then COVID happened and obviously the bar shut down. So
Sure,
like I had
yeah.
teaching to rely on. So that was really helpful. And I guess I just never went back to the cocktail bar. So yeah, that's kind of how that all happened. I don't know if I even answered your question. I kind of went off there, but
Yeah, for sure. What kind of classes were you teaching when you were actively teaching there?
yeah, I was teaching a bunch of different classes. I started out teaching media and like illustration 1, where they just do little projects. Like there's a book illustration project. There's like an illustrate different emotions project, and media is just like, yeah, learning about ink and watercolor and acrylic. You have different units. I taught figure drawing for a bit, which was really, really enjoyable. I liked that one a lot more than teaching media. And the last class I was teaching, and the one, if I do go back, I'll probably end up teaching again, was like advanced media for illustrators, which was basically an oil painting course. Mostly because that's what I wanted to learn when I was at my ed, and I had to like kind of switch around my schedule to be able to take oil painting. So I like when approached for like, if you want to make up a class, I was like, oh, I think students would be really interested in this. So
It's awesome that you were able to kind of fill that gap that your former self had experienced
yeah.
in the future. Was it difficult to, I mean, because like creating art and being able to create art is one thing, but being able to articulate to another person how to create art is like completely different muscle. So was that challenging, and just like developing curriculum and like all of the things that goes into teaching a craft? How did you deal with that?
I mean, as always, so I have this tendency to bite off way more than I can chew at all times. So like this was another one of those situations where I was like, I'm going to invent this class. And then I had to put together an entire curriculum, and like I probably should have asked for more help than I did. I tend to just go off and do things by myself, but that was a huge challenge and a big learning curve. The first year was very much touch and go. Like I had the curriculum, but I was changing it every week and like just doing all the research, because I was like, okay, I remember this stuff, but I want to make sure I'm teaching them the absolute correct way to do things. So I was basically like taking a course at the same time I was teaching the course, just to make sure I was doing it right. I don't know. It was probably fine, but I'm neurotic. So, yeah, it was a challenge. And like in terms of communicating, it's interesting. It's a really different skill set for me as someone who is really used to just like kind of being by themselves in their studio, like not talking to anyone and doing the thing. I found I really do enjoy talking in front of a group was really, really challenging and not my favorite part of it, but doing the individual talks and like kind of on more of a tutoring base was what I really enjoyed about it. Like kind of going up to each student and being like, how are you individually struggling with this painting, and how can we find a better way for you to do it, is definitely my favorite part of it.
Awesome. That's really cool. So, shifting gears a little bit, in addition to your, personal practice and teaching art, you've also illustrated children's books. First, I think your first one was in 2016, When I Am with Dad, I think written by Kimball Crosley. How did you first get into illustrating books, which obviously ties back to some of the things you loved as a kid?
Yeah, that was yet another example of just like someone I knew suggesting me for something.
Oh, okay.
So this was, I'm forgetting her name right now and I feel really bad, but, how did I even know her? Someone I met, like probably through one of my jobs, or she was a customer at one of my jobs, was slated to illustrate this book with, the art director for the book was Rebecca Emberley, who's Ed Emberley's daughter. So it like had this cool picture book connection too. So, like when she had a schedule conflict and somehow like my name kind of popped up to her and she was like, oh, I'll ask Katie if she wants to do it. So that she like connected us. And that's how I got started on that one. Which is just awesome. Kismet. It was a fun experience. It was, once again, I guess that's another spot where the illustration career came in helpful because like we had done a bunch of book illustration type courses. Like I knew the general gist of how to do this. So, it was something I was always interested in doing. I'm still interested in doing it. I'm illustrating one right now, actually, that's going to come out in fingers crossed April, I think.
Is that Olive Takes to the Sea? I saw a pre-order for that. So.
Yeah, that's Olive Takes to the Sea. So I'm really excited about that one. I don't know. It's something I loved doing. I was really inspired by it early on. And like, you're familiar with Sean Tan?
Yes. Yeah. I forget who recommended me looking at his stuff. I think it may have been Marco Mazzoni. I don't remember. Somebody recommended me check him out a couple years ago. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love his work so much. Ever since I discovered his work, I was like, that is just, I mean, to be able to do something like that with only pictures. I'm talking about The Arrival, and he obviously does books with words too, but I just really admire how he adapts paintings and his fine art style to a book format. Anyway, yeah, so it was something I was always interested in doing, and just like, why not?
Yeah. Was it, I guess, as a creation process, has it been different for you than how you work on your own personal art? Like, how do you approach the work for these books? Is it the same? Do you approach it in the same way?
It's a little different. The way I approach my work is very, it's different for every painting, but it really is just a matter of just reading the text, whatever the author has, and then just kind of the images that appear, like the movie in my mind, or like, okay, got to record that one. So it's easier, honestly, to come up with images for a book because everything is right there. And then the process of painting it, that's more challenging because trying to keep everything consistent, trying to keep the characters consistent, like looking like the same person. Like if I'm working on my own work, I can just let a painting be what it wants to be, basically. But there's a little bit more wrestling in the book illustration because, like, no, you have to look like this other painting because I kind of want everything to look consistent. So yeah, there's a lot more like going back and forth and making sure things look right, which is, yeah, kind of a fun part, but definitely the most challenging.
Yeah. How much collaboration is there with the author? Is there much back and forth between you and the author? Or?
So When I'm with Dad, there was zero. It was all with the art director. Like he didn't even see the work till it was all done, which must have been terrifying for him. It's like, I'm trusting this lady I've never met. Okay. With Erin, it's a lot easier. There's not a ton of collaboration, honestly, because she came to me because she liked my work in the first place. So it's been a lot of like, I show her the sketch and she's like, great. And then I move on with it, which is, from what I'm assuming, probably pretty rare, in terms of book illustration. I think there's probably a little bit more back and forth, but with this, like, she's so easygoing and so like happy with stuff. I think it's been kind of a breeze in terms of I'm pretty much just creating whatever I think the image needs to be.
That's awesome. And so when does this new one come? You said April is when the new one's out?
April, yeah. Pre-sales are out now. I think the like launch party for it is on April 14th. So I'm pretty sure that's when the physical books will be available to purchase. So
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. Would you like to do more of these? Is this something that you enjoy?
I would love to. Yeah, actually, I would love to do more. I've always wanted to write my own. So like that's been something I've wanted to do. It's I don't know, I'm always kind of jotting down ideas for stories, but I'm just kind of busy with other stuff. Nothing has really come to fruition yet. So I would like to do that a little bit more. I think it's a fun change from doing gallery work because gallery work, it lives together for such a short time. And I usually put a lot of thought into how the pieces interact with each other. But then they're just sold and like kind of portioned off and they go live in their own homes. And I just love the idea of like having a book and having all of like having the story intact and living on. And that is what goes off to live in people's homes, if that makes any sense. So I like the idea of maybe doing one of those, just kind of, I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Very cool. And I'm glad that's a great segue because I did want to talk about kind of the narrative nature of your work and how, if at all, they connect with one another. And so that's a good place to dive into that. Obviously, you being into book illustration makes a lot of sense to me because I think your work naturally has a very storybook kind of fairy tale aesthetic to it. But is it meant to be narrative? Are you trying to tell a story through your painted pieces, your gallery work?
I think so. Yeah. The narrative, it's never quite as straightforward as maybe a book illustration would be, but there's always some story that sneaks its way into the pieces. Sometimes it is on purpose. I have this, I know what's happening in the piece and that's what I want to portray. But a lot of the time it is just kind of inviting different elements in and hoping that the viewer finds something intriguing that they want to kind of explore narratively. I do really like open-ended art that other people's interpretations of my pieces are always way more interesting than my own. I think so. When everyone's like, oh, what did this one mean? I'm like, tell me what you think it means, because I guarantee it's better. It's just going to be disappointing if I tell you what it means. They're like, oh, that's it. So
have you ever been surprised by what somebody told you they interpreted your work as?
I have. Yeah, I have been. I wish I could think of an example of it right now, but yeah, it's happened a couple of times. Or they have a personal story that oh, this reminds me of this person I know. I'm like, that's awesome. Not at all intended, but that's very cool.
Does it help you as you're creating a piece or a body of work to develop a larger backstory that maybe doesn't make it into the piece, but just helps you kind of get your thoughts together?
Yeah, for sure. I do a lot of just writing and note taking and jotting things down. Honestly, most of my work starts with just wordless. I'm not much of a sketcher. I do sketch things and I like drawing from life, but most of the ideas for pieces come from the writing aspect of things. So just a phrase or something and then kind of developing things further. Usually it's kind of doing the back writing for the overall body of work, or a larger world. I always picture each piece is a snapshot of the specific world that I'm building more than the piece is the world, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So in that way, they are all kind of connected or meant to be kind of existing in the same universe.
Yeah, even if the character looks a little different or has a different colored hair, it's usually the same character kind of experiencing this world, whatever it entails. I just did a bunch of pieces in this walled garden that I kind of And I love I do like developing all of this stuff just for my own personal use because I think it adds depth to the pieces. But then I start explaining it to people and it sounds like I'm like Charlie Kelly in that meme, like pointing at all the red lines. Like I feel mildly insane telling people about these worlds. But yeah, this like world, like walled garden that these characters are in, because like the walled garden represents the like hesitancy to join the rest of the world and having your own little safe space, but feeling like a ghost within that safe space, like you're haunting yourself because you're too afraid to go out and join the rest of the world. So you're living in this beautiful place, but it's also kind of dead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm as somebody who loves world building in books and in movies and character development, I applaud that that's something that you enjoy and take pleasure in, because I'm sure there's others that appreciate that as well. You mentioned having a desire to kind of write your own illustrated books. Have you ever thought about writing, some of the stories behind the paintings that you've created for your galleries? Have you ever thought about writing those down and having that become a published work?
Yeah, that has occurred to me. And I think that is something I would like to explore. It's like, there's a certain amount of when the work is done, it's like, I want to move on and create more work. I don't take as much time as I probably should to pause and like enjoy the fact that it's done and maybe like do the writing then. But yeah, I think maybe that is something I would like to do, just like kind of explore a piece that is finished a little bit deeper and like write down. I think part of me is almost like, I haven't done it because I'm afraid that it's going to be less impressive to everyone else than it is in my mind. Like kind of how I was just telling you how other people come up with better stories. It's like, if I write it down, then people will know. and they're going to be like, oh, that's it. Oh, okay. Like
it takes the mystery away, or the I guess, imagination that other people bring to the table.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a big part of why I haven't done it yet, because I like kind of preserving that mystery. I think that is a big part of what is like draws people to the pieces. Like, because no one buys, I mean, the people who buy my art are usually buying it because they do have this like really deep emotional connection to it and they see parts of their own life in it. So like me putting the story on pieces that exist already almost feels like it's erasing that.
Right.
I don't know. Right. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I totally can understand. If you're listening and have an opinion on this, let us know.
Oh yeah, totally.
Do you ever base the stories or the people in your works, either in appearance or in like personality, on people that you know, like real world people in your life?
I think it's not always consciously, but I do think that they show up a lot, like just different little characteristics. There is, let's see, a lot of the time the characters are like almost representations of qualities, or like this, I'm just trying to think of different, like the rabbit characters are usually like more nurturing, and I feel like there's a lot of my mom in the rabbit characters for some reason. Just, I don't know, like the kind of the little huddling away with the garden kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of that. And like the skeleton characters usually to me represent, I don't know, I never find skeletons to be scary. Like, I don't think they're scary because they're us. Like it's like that could be me. Like I have one inside me right now. It's not scary.
Right.
But, and it always kind of to me represents like that, something that other people find scary, but is actually a, like seeing things for what they are, kind of is how I think of like the skeleton characters. And, yeah, I never thought about that before.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that. I heard somebody say the other day, when you brush your teeth, it's the only time that you're actually cleaning your skeleton.
Oh, I like that. It's true. Oh, weird. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only time you're actually cleaning like your bones.
Oh, I'm going to think about that every time I brush my teeth now. Like, time for your cleaning, little skeleton.
Right? I thought that was charming. So, obviously a lot of the setting in your work takes place in nature, and you obviously, like you said earlier, spent a lot of time in nature as a kid. Do you have a chance to spend much time in nature now? I mean, now that you're in the city, do you get out and actually go out and be one with nature like you did when you were younger?
I do always wish it was more. We live by a really nice park, so I spend a lot of time walking around there, and there's like a pond in the middle with ducks and geese, and my partner's folks live way up north, kind of in the middle of nowhere, just in the middle of the woods. So we visit them when we get the chance, and it's always really nice. I was really bummed the last time we went up there. There wasn't enough snow on the ground, so we couldn't go snowshoeing because that's something I really like doing. But yeah, going up there, and we actually did this more during COVID than we ever had before or since, which is kind of a bummer. But we went to a bunch of the local like national or state parks and like nature preserves, and really enjoyed doing that. But yeah, I would love to do that a little bit more this summer.
And how do you feel that nature or the natural world generally like participates in the story in your work? Is it more than just the backdrop? Does it actually take part in the story that you're telling?
I think so. I feel like it's a character. Just the general feeling of nature as something that is nurturing, but also doesn't care. It cares about us, but it doesn't care if we die, because it probably kind of wants us to, because then we're like feeding the worms. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's this, it's a character in that it's like kind of ruling all of us, because we are nature in a lot of ways. Like, we try to separate ourselves from it. Even more so these days, I feel like America in general, its whole deal is like separate us from nature as much as humanly possible. But I just love aspects where it defies and it keeps popping up. And like the more we fight it, the more it's going to rear its head. I feel like that's a big part of the, sorry to broach big topics, but a big part of the global warming thing is the more we try and ignore and like have technological fixes that will make our lives more comfortable, the more it's going to come back and say, no, you can't, you are me, I am you. You can't fight this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And before we started, we were talking about the unseasonable cold weather and where I live and the trauma that it's caused us. And to your point, like we're just making it unlivable for us. We're not killing the world. The world's going to live on without us.
Yes.
We're killing our own ability to live in this world.
Exactly. I hate that when people are like, "Oh, we're like killing the world." Like, no, the world is going to be, it will figure its own self out. Like, we're just making ourselves extinct. So
right, exactly. And of course, there's the whole economical disparity part of it, which is making it worse for the worst among us. We're making it sorry, I don't want to go. I could spend the whole rest of this.
Oh my god, me too. Yeah, let's have like a sub podcast of just complaining about that.
So you talked a little bit earlier about the way that you kind of approach ideation, and you're more of a writing down words and stories rather than sketching. Is there a research aspect of like that goes into making your images? Do you look things up, whether it be to look at photo references or just the story that you want to tell? Does that participate in your creation process at all?
Yes, that's actually my favorite part. I love the research part of it. If anything, that is probably my favorite part about like art and illustration in general, is that I'm a giant nerd and I love learning about nature and science and everything. So I will always take the opportunity to learn about something involved in my paintings, even if I don't necessarily use it. So yeah, I like doing a lot of research. I have a book on floriography, which is the Victorian language of flowers, I reference a lot, just because I love like adding meaning, even if no one like no one knows this, but like it's there for me. So if I'm doing a painting that I want to like, I want this to convey loss, I'll like look up what flowers represented loss. So if you feel like being like the Charlie Kelly again with my paintings, you can like go and look up all the flowers and figure out what I was talking about. But yeah, I'm doing the body of work I'm working on right now for the Baynard. I just realized I think I may have been pronouncing his name wrong.
Baynard, I believe.
Baynard, yeah. It's a lot of like Victoriana kind of toys, clowns. So I've been kind of going down a rabbit hole of like Victorian Christmas cards and how weird those are, and yeah, stuff like that. I love research. I'm a big fan of it.
It's awesome. Once you have that all kind of not necessarily planned out, but thought up, and you have a good solid idea for a piece, how do you generally develop that composition further? At that point, do you start sketching stuff down and develop that sketch more and more refined, or do you just jump right into painting?
Yes, usually I do. I'll do some thumbnails for sure before I start. I used to, a long time ago, I would jump right into painting, but as I've matured, I have realized no, I've got to do a couple of sketches first, or this is going to like take a million years, because I will work on something until it is in my mind as close to perfect as I can get it. So this way, like doing as much work before I start the actual painting, it's just going to be an easier process. So yeah, I'll do a couple of thumbnails to explore some different compositions. I'll do like a couple color studies to kind of really figure out what I want the mood of the piece to be. And then I will kind of develop that sketch further and do like a final, like almost like just black and white version of the final painting. Sometimes I'll start, if I'm like feeling really impatient, I'll start the painting after a couple of thumbnails, but usually I try to get a sketch done too. And like it seems like each piece has its own way it wants to be found. Like some I have to do a lot of fiddling with the composition and kind of sketching through it. And some of them, it will just like appear in my mind and be like, hey, I'm here. And like, it's like easy breezy from there. So
nice. In the cases where you do a more like refined sketch and you're more patient, does it change much after that, or is that pretty locked down at that point? Does it not evolve too much after you start painting?
I try to leave a little room for evolution, just because that is kind of one of the fun parts of working on the painting. It's something I have been really kind of going back and forth with. In the past year, I've been doing some just like experimenting with like being really like slavishly adhering to the sketch and trying to follow that as much as possible versus being a little bit more loose with it. And I think I do enjoy being a little bit more loose with it. Like, here's our game plan, but if we deviate from it, that's just what's going to happen, because like that's what this piece wants to be, and being a little bit more open to that. I feel like I'm not quite as process driven as a lot of other artists, like the painting process, because the image in my mind is usually like the one I have in my mind is the important thing, and not so much like the painting as a physical object is the most important thing, if that makes any sense. But I try to leave some room open for like for fun, especially in the backgrounds. Like usually I'll leave those a little bit more blank so it can kind of like be a little looser with brushstrokes and stuff like that.
Okay, cool. And as far as the mediums you work in, you pretty much work in oil almost exclusively. I guess, what is it about oil that you like it as a medium opposed to like acrylic or gouache?
So in the first portion of my career, up until about, I don't know, when I restarted in oils. But so I took that oil class in college and I really enjoyed it. But the practicality of having to do assignments and working really fast meant I couldn't really do a lot of stuff in oil. So I went with acrylic, and kind of my work after graduating was still acrylic because I was in a studio apartment and couldn't, like, it's really logistically difficult to work in oil in that kind of situation. So I kept going with that. But my what I was always aiming for was like the textures and the feel of an oil painting. So I was really fighting it. Like each painting kind of really did feel like a battle of like against the medium instead of working with it, which is weird because I feel like I don't see it looking back at my pieces as much as I thought I would, because it was like, God, that was really an unpleasant. I really envy painters who are like, oh, just the joy of it's just letting loose. I'm like, everything is just fighting. But I finally, when we moved into this apartment and I kind of like got my own little like studio here, we've got the second bedroom that I like slowly turned into my own studio by like
Nice.
my desk in here. It's like, let's move the futon out. And now it's just mine. But it was like, I really want to try oil again now that I can do that. And the first painting was like, this is what I should have been doing all along. It was like meeting up, like, you know, you talk to people and it's like, oh, we're simpatico. So yeah, it's the, I still have a bit of the acrylic process in that I like to use a lot of layers, but the ability to blend the layers, and I feel like gouache, watercolor, acrylic, they're really good for people who are like better at giving up and letting the medium do the talking, whereas oil's really good for control freaks, which is what I am. Like I go in with like a teeny tiny brush and I control all of the little details, and I feel like that's kind of what oil wants from you. So I do watercolor occasionally, and I really enjoy the Zen nature of it, but I have to really be in that headspace to actually work on it and get anything good, because otherwise I'm just like trying to control every little detail.
For sure. Yeah. Are there mediums that you'd want to experiment with or explore that you just haven't had a chance to?
Yeah, I just got gouache for Christmas. It was my mortal enemy in school. I had a terrible experience with gouache. Oh. It was just this nightmare assignment where we had to do something photorealistic with gouache, and like I don't know if you've worked with it before, but it dries really fast, and the colors darken, they shift, so you have to like be really careful about mixing colors. Anyway, it's a challenging medium. So I had a bad experience with it, and I really wanted to revisit it because when I was teaching a figure drawing class like 2 semesters ago, whatever, we did a gouache painting day where we used gouache, and I kind of did it along with the students. And I was like, oh, actually, this is a lot more fun than I remembered. And it was like really loose and not quite as it's not as fluid as watercolor. Obviously, you can control it a little bit more. So I'd really like to explore gouache a little bit more. That and chalk pastels were always really fun.
Nice. Very cool. So let's talk about your new show. It's coming up, I guess, like you said, in at Bain Art Gallery in Australia, opening on April 27th. What can you tell me about this new body of work?
It's well, I'm really enjoying it. It is inspired by so I feel like my work as I have progressed has like I'm kind of letting a little bit more of the outside world in, as opposed to it being really like fairy tales and really kind of calm and happy. I'm letting a little bit more of like I don't like political art because some people can do it really well. Like, what is her name? Lori Lipton. I don't know if you're familiar with. Oh my gosh, I love her work so much. She does it right. I think it can be a little preachy, and since I really enjoy things that are open to interpretation. Anyway, so there's like a little bit more of that sneaking in. It's not like overtly political, but just kind of a little bit more of the world, like my thoughts on the world peeking in, kind of thoughts on like, where are we going? What are we doing? What is media doing to us? Like kind of those thoughts. But I am also, there's a lot of like kind of Victorian clowns, a lot of those like kind of Pierrot costumes,
Nice.
exploring different animals. It's called Misfit Toys. So just kind of like I've got a series of little 4x4 guys of just different like characters and objects that are all like these kind of like misfit lost creatures that I really enjoyed making, just because I kind of wanted to do something fun and joyful and explore this stuff, but do it in like a really fun and joyful way. Cause I do have a tendency of like taking my work a little bit too seriously and like being too controlling, and just like having an idea of how I want it to look, and kind of not letting it be what it is. And this is a practice of like trying to merge those two worlds, of like trying to engage with the world on like a larger scale, but also doing it in a joyful way. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, I mean, your description of or the name Misfit Toys, definitely I can understand how that could tie to letting a little bit more of our uncomfortable world in.
Yes, yeah.
Because when I think about like the name Misfit Toys, it makes me think, I guess, simultaneously of like Toy Story, but then also like the Island of Misfit Toys from Rudolph. So like both of those things come into my head when I think about the title. Just the title alone kind of draws those thoughts. And so now you mentioning that, you know, it's not overtly political, but letting some of the discomfort from our outside world bleed in. I could see where you could go a lot of ways with that. I guess, is that a theme that you kind of developed up front and you're like, okay, this is the idea that I want to explore with my work? Or did you just start working and that's sort of what surfaced and you identified it as kind of where your head's at?
Yeah, I think it kind of happened in tandem. I do try to do like a lot of the things that end up happening are subconscious that I only really realize later. But if I'm working on a body of work like this, I want to be aware of that. So I'll like do a little bit of sketching and then take a look at that and be like, okay, where's my head at? So that I kind of realized like that's where I'm at with this, in a place where I am kind of wanting to explore some more of the uncomfortable themes. Because something I've noticed about my earlier work is that there has been a lot, especially, okay, so my last show at Haven, it was painted basically during the beginning of COVID. So I was obviously feeling extremely uncomfortable, and there was a lot of escapism in it. And like, I just want to make this like comfy space for myself.
And the show is called Earthly Paradise. So
exactly.
Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I need to just find a spot where I can be comfortable, because I'm not comfortable in real life right now. So, so this is kind of like, it's maybe taking a little bit of a step back, like maybe taking a peek out the door, like being like, what's going on out here? Sort of like, that's kind of the way the show feels for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not necessarily more comfortable after peeking out the door.
Oh, no, it's way more uncomfortable.
Yeah. But it's good that like some of your characters are maybe getting some exposure to that and learning how to deal with it, along with all of us.
Exactly.
So, you know, obviously the show's still a few months out from when we're recording it, but is it safe to assume that you've already started working? Like, how far are you into the like working on the show?
All of the initial sketches are done. Like I know what the pieces are, and things are, they're kind of starting to move, but I'm not quite aware of the visuals of it yet. I've got the first piece done, obviously, because I posted that. I'm kind of like thinking about color palettes and stuff like that. But I have a really good idea of how it's going to look. So yeah.
Do you have an idea of how many pieces you expect there will be for it?
There's a set of 16 little 4x4 guys of the different characters, because I saw another artist do that. I was like, oh, I love that idea, because I love painting small. But the problem with painting small is that when you do like a gallery show on a wall, like the gallery needs more to fill the space.
Right. Right.
So it's like, I'll just do a bunch of those and you can kind of display them together and then they'll all work. I love when pieces can kind of interact with one another too. So I like the idea of having this collection, and then you can kind of look at it and they can kind of like inform the others. So I've got that. And then there are going to be 5 larger pieces that kind of like are larger scenes next to it, that I'm looking forward to. There is very much like, yeah, like a toys circus, like kind of childhood aesthetic that's kind of merging with this like kind of hesitantly peeking out the door and seeing what's out there in the real world. Because I like, I guess, contradictions and things that kind of don't like opposites. Yeah. Still like combining opposites and seeing like how that dialogue can work out.
Awesome. Very cool. You mentioned color palette earlier, like working out the color palette for the show. Do you generally like to think in terms of aligning a color palette for an entire body of work in that way, or do you approach it like one piece at a time?
The controlling part of me really likes to do it. I did a whole like color palette. Like I did swatches. Like these are the swatches I'm going to use because these are the colors I'm really into right now. But then I do the piece and it's like, no, that's not the color this piece wants to be. So I do try. It doesn't always work out that way. But yeah, it's more important that the individual piece is successful than it is for me to have a overall color palette that looks the same. Although I think just by virtue of it being me who paints it, just like the colors that I naturally use will like kind of all mesh together anyway. So yeah.
Are you planning to attend?
I wish. I was planning for a while. Plane tickets are really expensive. Australia. Yeah, it sucks because like I have actually a friend that I met on Instagram who lives in Melbourne who like I really want to visit too, and I just think this would be a really good opportunity, but it's coming up really fast and it's really expensive. So it would be nice if I could, but I might have to wait until, because is it like a 24-hour flight?
It's a long flight. It's like a whole day.
Yeah. Have you been?
I haven't. No, but I know people that have flown either to Australia or to Eastern Asia. You know, the mm-hmm. like really long flights. It really takes a lot out of you. You have to dedicate like 2 days on both sides of your trip just to recover and like.
Exactly. Yeah. So if I did that, I would want it to be like a really long trip so I could really do like see Australia proper. And I don't think I can do that right now, which is a real bummer, but fingers crossed I'll show at Bay and Art Gallery again. So I'll be able to go. I'll be there in spirit.
Awesome. Anything else you have coming up that you'd want to put on people's radars? You know, print releases, events, stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. I've got, the book, April 14th, and pre-orders are out now if that's like the type of thing you're into. I'm going to be vending at the Oddities Market in Chicago on April 6th and 7th. So I don't do a lot of fairs, but I really like that one. So I will be there in person. And else I have a show coming up at, oh my God, I'm not even going to talk about this one. Let's focus on the Bay and Art show. Yeah, that's the big one.
All right. Awesome. Where can people find you online so they can stay up to date with all these things you got going on?
Yeah, my Instagram is always a good place to start. Katie_Gamb, Gamb. My website, same name, no underscore. Though honestly, probably the best place to follow my stuff is to sign up for my mailing list, just because I know a lot of the time posts kind of get buried and stuff. So that's where, like, if you want to actually keep up with stuff in real time, that's the best place to go.
Awesome. Very cool. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Oh, geez. I wrote a list down because I knew you were going to ask this. I was like, I'm not going to remember. I would love to see you interview. Oh, I've got two. I really love, I think Carson Ellis would be really interesting to talk to. I love her work. I haven't seen a ton of interviews with her. I don't know if she does them. And she's kind of adjacent. I've always really admired her work. And Adam Stoner, he's local. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a Milwaukee guy. I love his work. It's like architectural, like inspired by kind of almost like medieval architecture, with these like ghostly figures walking around in shrouds. It's fascinating.
Oh, cool.
I think he would be a good guest too.
Awesome. Great suggestions. I appreciate it. And Katie, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, this was fun.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Katie. It was really interesting to hear Katie talk about how she, sort of hesitates to write down her story in each of the pieces that she makes. Even though there's definitely a story there, it seems like she's afraid that if she shares what she was thinking about the work, it could in some way stifle the viewer's own imagination and could inhibit their ability to form, their own connection with the work. And even though we have talked about that in some form, how artists like to, keep their intent with a piece sort of to themselves, to invite viewers to come with their own ideas. I guess I hadn't really thought about it in terms of that kind of, very narrative storytelling and, really world building. So it was interesting to think more about that in the context of Katie's work. And that was another thing that I really appreciate about her approach to art making is doing like actual world building and character development. It's such a lovely way to approach, the work as being pieces of a much larger whole. Obviously, I've had on artists in the past, and we've talked about this sort of approach with their craft in similar ways. My chat with Greg Simpkins comes to mind and his world, The Outside. I should have asked Katie if she actually had a name for her world. It'd be interesting to know what it is if she does. Her new show sounds really interesting, especially when contrasted with her last show, Earthly Delights. The two together not only shows where, Katie was at these different points of these difficult last few years, but sort of also a statement on the world around her as a whole. The Earthly Delights show was all about creating a paradise that she could sort of lose herself in, to get away from the horror that was the early days of COVID. And now, with COVID being a more understood part of our lives, she's ready to take a peek outside and see how things are going in the world right now. Obviously, the risk being that the very, uncomfortable truths of our current reality might just, find their way inside if she's not too careful. I'm interested to see how she connects that idea with misfit toys and the larger narrative of her, portfolio. Be sure to follow Katie's and Baynard's social media to get the latest on that show. And you can also pre-order Katie's new children's book, Olive Takes to the Sea, which will be released in mid-April, I believe the 17th. And then if you're in the Chicago area, go see Katie at the Oddities Market there on April 6th and 7th. If you want to know anything beyond that, definitely be sure to subscribe to Katie's newsletter to keep up to date with those things. So thanks again to Katie for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you could help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.